What kind of doctor do you go? Like, what is he they an endocrinologist, or like what kind of doctor do you visit?
I have like all the primo doctors these days because they're like, dude, this chick. I don't think I've shared on the podcast, but I actually came back for all the markers of lupus, which would be wild because lupus actually runs in my family. And I do have a couple of symptoms that's like, they've never like been necessarily correlated to thyroid stuff, but I've always been like, oh, that's kind of weird. And, so we have some lupus rabbit holes to go down after this. But my doctor that's been managing my thyroid stuff for years and years is actually Sean Tassone. He's an OBGYN in Austin. But originally I just saw him because it was like needed my annual pap smear or something like that. And then he actually specializes in like hormone therapy, and he does a lot of stuff actually with a little bit older demographic than I. So he really specializes in like perimenopause and menopause and basically helping women optimize during that period of life. But he's amazing. It's like quite literally, it's like, I can, send an email whenever I want to check labs. It's like I personally try to check my stuff every 2 to 3 months just because I want to see stuff before it starts to go down the poop hole, right? Like I want to see it early.
Because thyroid it's not like an instant, it takes time to change. Correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's the thing is like, you couldn't like go on meds and like check it monthly. It's like, it does take a little bit of time for hormones just aren't fast to move. Like that's the biggest thing. But yeah, you're 100% correct. It's like those are a little bit slower to change on that spectrum. But yeah, for me, it's actually an OBGYN. But normally, like I said, it's like if I hadn't found a doctor early on like that kind of had like multidisciplinary, I'd 100% be hitting up Google and go that way for sure.
Mm-hmm. So back to the lab tests, like, because there are some specific tests that people need to check. And a lot of times I think like most physicians will only check, like one blood marker. And yeah, so tell us, what values do people need to run when they get a thyroid check?
Quick backstory on like basically why that happens is back in the 90s, it used to be super popular or it was just like the best information we had available to us at the time, right? We just didn't know enough information about the thyroid. So it used to be super common, or it used to be completely normal practice to basically only look at TSH, which is your messenger hormone that basically says, yo, we need to make more of this thing. So quick breakdown, your TSH is your messenger hormone. Your free T4 is basically kind of the Legos. It's the building blocks to the castle, if you want to think of it that way. And then your free T3 is basically your actual thyroid hormone. Like that's the goal. That's what we're trying to make. When we have a lot of that, we're going to feel good. We're going to feel our best. And so if you want to think of, it's like we need to basically take those Legos, we need to take those little bricks, and then we need to actually build the castle. So when we convert, we're taking free T4, we turn it into free T3, and then we ride off into the sunset. We're happy. We feel awesome. So that's kind of the big three is we're wanting to check TSH. We're wanting to check free T4. We're wanting to check free T3. And then we need to keep going because, again, we can get thyroid antibodies at any time. And so that's going to be your TPO and your TGAB. I always tell people it's like you don't have to check those every time. Like check those three of TSH, free T4, free T3. And then again, it's like maybe like once a year. Again, if you feel good, your thyroid values come back, but like you're just not it feels like something's off, like then check those. Even for me, it's like I check antibodies maybe like once a year, something like that. I don't stress over it too bad because it's just these days not something I've struggled with. There was a period, it was like 2013, 2014. That was like the one and only time I had antibodies. And then I haven't had a problem since. But yeah, basically you need 5 values. But then, like I said, you got to keep going. And so it's like you would want to check things like your vitamin D levels. You would want to check, like it's really common to see deficiencies in like B12 or again, like things like iron, running anemic and stuff like that. So there are other things, and we can kind of go into those later that I would suggest checking as well. But in terms of specific thyroid, if your doctor ain't pulling all 5, give them the middle finger and go get in bed with somebody that will. We are not here for that energy, and out they go.
Yeah. So what's considered, if you had hypothyroid, what would be off in those values?
So I'm going to refer, Mind Pump Media has interviewed so many amazing doctors about this. I know they did one specifically with Stephen Cabral where he actually went through and he said, hey, as a doctor, these are like the specific, I want to see you, in these specific ranges. So I would, refer to that because I loved that podcast. It was so informational. And that was probably just from a few months ago. It was a newer podcast, but it was Mind Pump Media and Stephen Cabral. But definitely check that out if you're somebody that you're like, I want to nerd out over the lab side of stuff. But there's a couple of different ways that you can see it. One of the most common ways is that your TSH is going to be really, really high. So if you pull your TSH and you're like in the sunset of like, hey, my TSH came back as like a 3, a 4, a 5. Well, if your body is pumping out this message of, hey, produce more thyroid hormone, we might want to do a little more digging, right? Same thing, it's like if your free T3 is really low, particularly for me, this is again, just me personally, I know that I tend to feel best when my free T3 is somewhere basically between like a 3 and a 3.5. Anytime I'm dipping below the threes, if I'm like 2.8, 2.5, God bless, there's been days where I was low twos. That's historically when I know I'm going to feel like garbage. And that's for most people. The biggest thing you have to understand with thyroid stuff is that we have reference ranges. And just like with nutrition, right? It's like if you look at the reference range for protein, it'll be like, yeah, you just need like 50 grams a day of protein, man, you good. And it's like, we're trying to get like body weight, right? Or like 0.7 body weight.